Hey guys, welcome to the Dark Manor podcast, the only podcast to revive after 3 months.
Yeah, somehow.
I'm Hayden.
I am Haxon, aka David.
Today we will be reading my favorite creepypasta, Ticci Toby, because I couldn't wait enough. We have some plans to make it longer.
Hopefully.
So let's get started.
Yeah, get your vocals ready.
Minecraft.
We were trying to play that.
The long road home seemed to go on and on. The road continued to outstretch in front of the vehicle endlessly. The light that shone through the
You got it?
Part of the reason why I'm reading it because I actually have a stutter, and it goes well with the character.
It just works.
The light that shone through the branches of the tall green trees danced across the window in random patterns, every once in a while, obnoxiously shining in your eyes. The surrounding was full of deep green trees forming a forest around the road. The only sound was the sound of the car's engine as it traveled down the path. It was a peaceful and lit-off, serene feeling. Although the ride seemed like a nice one, it lacked every form of nice for both passengers. The middle-aged woman behind the steering wheel had neat, short, brown hair that fit her complexion quite well.
That sounds like a nice girl.
Shush, David, let me have this. She wore a green V-neck T-shirt and a pair of blue jeans. Diamond stud earrings decorated each of her ears, which partially showed from behind her haircut. She had deep green eyes, which were brought out by her shirt, and the lighting seemed to make them more noticeable.
Her tits?
Shut up.
Oh, yeah, her eyes. Yeah, of course.
There wasn't much significance to her appearance. She just looked like any average mother that you'd see on TV shows and such. But one thing for sure made her differ from those average mothers, and that was the dark bags under her eyes. Her facial expression was gloomy and sad, although she genuinely looked like one who smiled a lot. She would sniffle every once in a while, and occasionally glance back in the rearview mirror to look back at her son in the back seat, who was hunched over partially, his arms held tight around his chest, and his head pressed against the cold window. The boy lacked any normal appearance. Anyone could blandly see that something was wrong with him. His messy brown hair went in every which way, and his pale, almost gray skin was brought out by luminescent lighting. His eyes were dark, unlike his mother's, and he wore a white t-shirt and scrub pants that had been provided to him by the hospital. The clothes he had worn before were so shredded and blood-stained they weren't wearable anymore. Yet somehow that was perfectly fine for Jeff. Like, literally, his...
Hold on, what?
In the popular version of the Jeff the Killer story, his clothes was all scratched and burned up, yet they were able to sew it together
and clean it perfectly.
Yeah,
I don't think that's how that works.
Yeah, it's not. The right side of his face bared a few cuts along his split eyebrow. His right arm was bandaged up all the way to his shoulder, which had been shredded when his right side had hit the shattered glass. His injuries appeared to be painful, when really he couldn't feel a thing. He never could feel a thing. That was just one of the glories about being him. One of the many challenges he had to face growing up was growing up with the rare disease that caused him to be completely numb towards pain. Never before...
I mean, at least if he gets slapped across the face, he won't feel it. Or stabbed in the back.
Well, yeah, but if he gets...
shot.
But, yeah, that's also very dangerous, because...
Yeah, but if he knows he's been shot, but he doesn't feel being shot, that's good.
Yeah, sure, but if you don't know that you're being hurt, you're probably dying at that point.
But of course, usually when someone gets shot, they like, something happens. They either like fall or something. So that's also how you know you got shot. Anyway, continue reading.
Yeah, I'm just trying. Never before had he felt himself get hurt. He could have lost an arm and felt nothing. That and another major disorder he had faced was the one that deemed him many insulting nicknames in the short time he attended grade school before he moved to homeschooling with his Tourette syndrome?
Tourette's.
Tourette.
Do you not know what Tourette's are, you retard?
No, it just sounds similar to a character, but which caused him to tick and twitch in ways he couldn't control. He would crack his neck uncontrollably and twitch every once in a while. The kids would tease him, call him Ticci Toby, and mock him with exaggerated twitching and laughing. It got so bad he turned to homeschooling. It was too hard for him to be in a common learning environment with seemingly every kid poking, or more like stabbing, fun at him. Hold on. Toby,
what are you doing?
I was scrolling down. Toby stared blankly out the window. His face was empty of any depictable emotion, and every few minutes his shoulder, arm, or foot would twitch. Every bump the car tires hit made his stomach turn. Toby Rogers was a boy's name, and the last time Toby remembered riding a car was when it crashed. That's all he thought about, unconsciously replaying everything he had remembered before he blacked out, over and over again. Toby had been the lucky one when his sister hadn't been so lucky.
She did.
Shut up. I'm in the zone here.
You're in the zone while I'm dragging you out of the zone every 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's weird when I'm just quiet. I'm gonna keep commentating randomly.
So
it makes you feel weird.
When the thought of his older sister came, he couldn't help but let his eyes begin to tear up. The horrible memories replayed in his mind, her screaming that had been cut off when the front of the car was smashed in. It all went blank for a moment before Toby opened his eyes to see his sister's body, her forehead pierced with glass shards. Her hips and legs were crushed under the force of the steering wheel, her torso pushed in from the late 8 inflated airbag. This was the last thing he had seen of his dear older sister.
She got ripped to shreds by a truck.
The road home continued on for what seemed like forever. It took so long to get home due to his mother wanting to avoid passing the site of the crash. When the surrounding gave into a familiar neighborhood, they had both been more than ready to get out of the car and step into their own home. It was a older neighborhood with quaint little houses all next to each other. The car drove in front of a little blue house with white window panes. They both quickly noticed the old vehicle that was parked in front of the house and the familiar figure who stood out in the doorway.
Excuse me.
Toby felt automatic anger and frustration take over him at the sight of his father who wasn't there. His mother pulled the car up into the driveway beside him before turning off the engine and preparing to step out and face her husband. "Why is he here?" Toby said quietly as he looked back at his mother, who reached to open the car door. "He's your father, Toby, and he's here because he wants to see you." His mother responded with a monotone voice, trying to sound less shaky. Yet he couldn't have driven up to the hospital to see Lyra before she died. Toby narrowed his eyes out the window. "He was drunk that night, honey. He couldn't drive." "Yeah, when is he not? Toby pushed open the door before his mother and stumbled out onto the driveway where he met his father's gaze before looking down at his feet with a stern expression. God damn it. His mother stepped out behind him and met her husband's eyes before walking out around the car. His father opened up his arms, expecting a hug from his wife, but she walked past him and put her arm around Toby's shoulder and influenced him to begin walking inside. Connie, her husband.
Why did you say it like that? Connie!
I just feel like whenever the father's speaking, it should be in the tone of like a sitcom.
Wait, hold on. I have a better way of doing it.
Hey, want me to set and you it so you can follow along?
No, it's fine.
I'm sending in.
I said no. Hold on, I have a better way. Of doing it. It should sound like this. Connie.
Okay. Let's get back to reading, shall we? Her husband began to say in her raspy voice. What, no welcome home hug, huh? She ignored her husband's obnoxious words and walked past him with her son under her arm. Hey, he's 16. He can walk by himself. His father began to follow them in.
He's also dying.
He's 17. Connie glared back at him before opening the door to the house and stepping inside. Toby, why don't we get you into your room to rest, okay? I'll come and get you when dinner's ready. No, I'm 16. I can walk by myself, Toby said sarcastically, and glared back at his father before stumbling up the small staircase and turning.
He gets up one step and just trips.
And turning into his room where he slammed the door violently. His little room didn't have much in it, just a small bed, a dresser, a window, and his walls had a few framed pictures of his family. Back when they were a family, before his father became an alcoholic and acted violently towards the rest of his family. Toby remembered when he was arguing with his mother and he grabbed her by the hair and shoved her to the floor. And when Lyra had tried to break it up, he pushed her and she hit her back on the corner of the kitchen counter.
Now that's how you become disabled.
Toby could never forgive him for what he did to his mother and sister. Never. Toby didn't care how much his father beat him down. He couldn't feel it anyway. What he did care about was how he intentionally hurt the only two people he cared about. And when he was waiting in the hospital where his sister took her last few breaths...
I guess you could say he's a motherfucker.
Excuse me, this is an emotional moment right now.
So what if it is?
The only person who didn't rush there was his dad. Toby stood by the window and looked out onto the street. He could have sworn he saw things out the corner of his eye, but quickly blamed it on the medication he had been put on. When dinner time had come around and his mother called up to him, Toby came down the stairs and hesitantly sat down at the table across from his father, and in between his mother and an empty chair. It was quiet as his parents picked at their food, but Toby refused to eat. So he just watched his dad with a blank stare.
Hold on, just imagine you've got a kid. You look up and he's just like staring at you. Like, what the fuck?
That's just a normal dinner table for me.
Yeah, I know, right? Except I don't eat at dinner table.
Continue. We do. His mother caught onto his stare towards his father and elbowed him slightly. Toby looked over at her slightly and looked down at his uneaten
She just kicks him in the leg.
In which he didn't touch. Toby laid in bed. He pulled his covers over his head and stared at the window. He was tired, but there was no way he would fall asleep. He couldn't. There was too much to think about. He had been debating on whether or not to follow his mother's directions and forgive his father, or continue holding a grudge with his boiling hatred.
I would do that.
He heard his door creak open, and his mother padded into the room and sat on the bed next to him.
She whispered in his ear.
She.
It's all ogre now.
This isn't Shrek is Love, Shrek is Life. We'll get to Shrek.exe later.
Alright, Jesus Christ.
She reached over and rubbed his back, which had been turned to her. I know it's hard, Toby. Trust me. I understand.
He is hard.
But I promise you, it'll get better, she said softly. When is he going to leave? Toby said with an innocent tone in his shaky voice. Connie let her gaze fall to her feet. I don't know, honey. He's sane as far as I know, she replied. Toby didn't respond. He just continued to look forward at the wall, holding his damaged arm near his chest.
Man, that's a nice looking wall.
After a few minutes of silence, his mother sighed, before she leaned in to kiss his cheek and stood up to walk out the door. Good night.
Good night.
She said as she closed the door.
Hold on, what took you so long to say good night?
I don't know.
You paused for like 3 seconds.
Dramatic effect. Dramatic.
That is not
effect.
dramatic at all.
The hours passed slowly, and Toby couldn't quit tossing and turning. Every time he let his imagination take over, he would hear the screeching of tires, the screaming of his sister, and he could uncontrollably jerk in bed.
Dude, jerking in his bed, I was thinking of his dying sister. Jesus. What a psycho.
You got me there.
Yeah, I had to.
He threw off his covers, laying on his back.
In his back?
He
imploded on himself.
He pulled his pillow over his face and cried into it. He could feel his chest rise and fall as he let out.
He cries as he jerks off? Jesus, that's even worse. I love ruining this story. It's fun.
Stop.
Okay, continue. I won't do it again.
I'm in full Tiki Toby cosplay for reading this. Shut up.
You like throw on the whole cosplay? Alright, let's do this. Just continue the story.
He can hear his own pitiful weeping. He would have been screaming and crying if he didn't press his pillow over his face. After a few seconds, he threw the pillow off of his face as well as sat up, hunched over, holding his head and breathing roughly, tears streaming from his eyes. He couldn't help but cry. He tried to keep it in, but he couldn't help but whine and whimper as he sat there shaking. He inhaled before he stood up and walked around his bed to the window and peered out.
Some nice looking hard trees.
Taking deep breaths, trying to calm down. He rubbed his eyes and looked out at the group of tall pine trees across the street. He stopped suddenly, and his gaze slowly centered on something standing under the streetlight.
Yeah, who the fuck is that?
He heard ringing in his ears as he couldn't look away. The figure stood beside the street, about 2 feet shorter than it, long arms draped at its sides as it stared up at him with non-existing eyes. The figure had no features whatsoever. No eyes, no mouth, no nose, yet it held Toby's hypnotized stare.
Is that a pedophile?
It just reminds me of one video where a guy was reviewing Slender, the 8 pages, Slender showed up, and he just like, oh shit, it's a white guy.
It's not a pedophile, it's a white man. What the fuck?
The ringing in his ears grew, seemingly peering into his very being. The ringing in his ears grew louder and louder each second he stared before suddenly it all went black. The next morning, Toby woke in his bed.
I want to know how the fuck he got in his bed.
He felt different.
Some man's doing some freaky shit.
He wasn't tired at all, and when he consciously woke up, it felt like he had been lying there, awake for hours. He had no thoughts flowing through his mind. He sat up slowly and stumbled over to the wall, but when he stood up, he automatically felt dizzy.
How do you feel dizzy if you can't feel anything?
He can't feel...
Do you just get like... Hold on, do you just get like the effect of feeling dizzy?
He feels sick. He just can't feel pain.
No, he can't feel anything.
No, he can feel pain. No, he can't feel pain. That's about it.
You poke him, he's not gonna feel that.
Well, yeah, but
If he's freezing cold, he ain't gonna feel it.
yeah, he would, because that affects his. Yeah.
No. Okay, the disorder he has, it means he can't feel anything. Not just pain, nothing at all.
Something tells me he would actually feel sickness. He would feel when he's sick.
He can feel his insides. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
He stumbled to the doorway and walked down the stairs. His parents were sitting at the table.
Imagine he just fell down the stairs.
His father was in tune with a small TV that sat on the countertop, and his mother reading the newspaper.
He's like 5 inches close to it.
She quickly looked over when she felt Toby's presence looming behind her. Well, good morning, sleepyhead. You've been sleeping forever. She greeted him with a hesitated smile.
With hesitated, not smile. With a hesitated smile. Hesitated smile.
Yeah. Toby slowly looked over at the clock and noticed it was 12:30 p.m. I made you breakfast, but it got cold. I was going to wake you, but I felt you needed sleep. Her expression fell from happy to worried as her son resisted responding to her. Are you all right? Toby stumbled over and sat by his father. He felt as if he was on idle and had no control over his actions. He was seeing everything he did, but it didn't seem to register in his brain properly. He reached out to his father's arms, but his hands ended up getting slapped. His father turned to him abruptly and pushed his chair over with his foot. Don't touch me, boy! He yelled.
Boy. Why did you say it like that, boy? Touch me, boy.
You want to play the father?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. His mother stood up. Alright, knock that off. That is the last thing we need. I swear, if we had JAP, she
could be the mother.
Yeah.
Except she doesn't fucking join!
Yeah.
Continue.
The days went by and things continued as they were. Connie spent most of her time cleaning up the house, and her rude husband spent most of his time ordering her around.
Asshole.
It's just how it used to be before the crash.
That's not good.
Toby never really left his room. He would sit by his bed and tremble. His mind would wander, but his thoughts changed to be too fast to be remembered. He would pace around his small room like a caged animal or stare out the window.
Why the fuck don't you go outside then, you dumb bitch?
Would you want to go outside?
I mean, if I feel trapped in a room, yeah. Eat myself out that window, bro.
You wouldn't feel it. You wouldn't feel it.
He wouldn't feel it, no. As I said.
Anyway, the unhealthy cycle continued. Connie continued to be pushed around by her husband, being way too submissive to him, and Toby remained in his room. Before he could think twice, he would begin to chew on his hands, tearing the flesh from his fingers. He would gnaw his hands until they bled. When his mother walked in on him while he was doing so, she reacted horribly. She rushed him downstairs and grabbed the first aid.
Well, I mean, no one would want to walk in on their kid masturbating.
That doesn't make sense, though.
She walked in on him while he was doing so. If you just take that one
biting
sentence,
his finger. If you take it out of context, then yeah, sure, that can mean anything, but...
You could have been biting his fingers and then jerking off at the same time. Never tried that before? Bony hand job. Bony hand job.
Anyway, let's continue.
It feels like a different person is doing
Anyway, let's continue. Wrapping his hands in it. She demanded that he wouldn't leave her side from then. He isolated himself so much that he grew to hate being around others. His memory grew glitchy as well. He'd start missing memory of minutes, hours, days, and so on. He would begin talking nonsense about things completely unrelated to conversations he would have. He'd go off.
Yeah, how did you like that football game? Oh yeah, yesterday's dinner was really good.
He'd go off about seeing things. Sharks in his sink as he washed the dishes.
Those are some small ass sharks.
Hearing
That's a big ass sink.
Hearing crickets in his pillows. And seeing ghosts outside his bedroom window.
That might be true.
All the nonsense and slandered him in a counselor's office. His mother grew too anxious about his mental health. He decided it would be good for him to talk to a professional about what he was feeling. Connie walked Toby into the building, holding his hand and guiding him in. She walked him up to the front desk and began talking to the lady who sat beside it.
Behind it.
Miss Rogers, the lady asked.
No. And it's Mrs., you dumb bitch. She's married.
Mrs. Rogers, the lady asked. Yes, that's me. Connie nodded. We're here to see the Dr. Oliver.
The Dr. Oliver.
To see Dr. Oliver. I'm here with Toby Rogers. Yes, right this way.
You need to stop that. Oh God, what are you gonna do for the doctor?
My sister walked in while we were recording. She didn't even bother to knock.
Yeah, she kind of just stared at you from what I heard.
Yeah, and I just shoot. The ladies.
Continue.
The ladies.
We can cut that out.
Anyway, no, I'm too lazy to.
Oh God.
The lady stood up and led them down a long hallway. Toby looked at the framed artwork down the halls and tuned into the sound of the lady's high heels on the hardwood floor.
Fun fact, we're about half an hour in.
She opened the door to a room with a table and 2 chairs. If we can get him to sit in here for a few minutes, I'll get the doctor. She smiled and held the door open. What now?
Get to the doctor!
Toby stumbled into the room and sat down at the table.
It's like a little kiddie table.
He looked over at his mother and the lady before the door slowly shut behind them. He looked around the room before he held up his tightly bandaged hands and began to bite at the bandages to unwrap his hands. But was interrupted as the door swung open.
He's like, shit.
And a young woman in a black and white spotted dress.
Is it mostly black or is it mostly white?
In light blonde hair stepped in, holding a clipboard and pen. Toby? She asked with a smile. Toby looked up at her and nodded. Nice to meet you, Toby. My name is Dr. Oliver.
Oliver Queen?
She put her hands out for him to shake, but hesitantly pulled away when she noticed his bandaged hands. Oh. She smiled nervously before clearing her throat and sitting in the chair across from him. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. Try to answer them as honestly as possible, okay? She placed her clipboard.
What's your name, Toby? Toby what?
Hey, shush! Toby nodded slowly and held his restrained hands in his lap. How old are you, Toby? 17. He responded quietly.
17. 7 days.
She wrote that down on the paper and was clipped to the clipboard. What is your full name? Toby Aaron Rogers. What is your birthday? April 28th. Who is your immediate family? Toby paused for a minute before answering. My mom, my dad, and he stopped. My sister. I heard about your sister, dear. I'm really sorry. Her expression faded into a sad, pity-filled look. Toby nodded. Do you remember anything from the crash, Toby? Toby looked away from her. His mind went blank for a moment. He looked
That's
down
asking a Vietnam veteran to think about Vietnam.
He looked down at his lap.
It's going to turn into seizing and screaming.
And in the surrounding, he heard a faint ringing sound. His eyes widened as he froze in place. Toby? The counselor asked.
Counselor?
The counselor asked. Toby, are you listening? Toby felt a shiver go down his spine until he froze once again and slowly looked over out the window through the door.
Oh, shit.
Where he saw it, a dark, featureless figure peering in at him. He stared, eyes widened, the ring growing louder and louder until suddenly the loud voice of the counselor broke his trance.
Scream it.
Toby! She yelled. Toby jumped and fell sideways out of his chair and backed up into
Oh, fuck!
Dr. Oliver stood up, holding a clipboard to to her chest, a surprised look in her eyes. Toby met her eyes again, his breath hitching as he twitched. That night, Toby laid in bed, his eyes dazed as he stared straight up at his ceiling. He could feel himself begin to doze off when he heard the scattering of footsteps down his hallway. Are you doing sound effects?
No. No, this would be sound effects.
Okay. He sat
Or I
up.
could just like walk.
We're getting towards the climax, so shh.
Oh yeah, Toby wants the climax.
He sat up and looked towards the doorway, his door wide open. There was no light. Everything was lit by the luminescent blue glow
It's
of
pretty
the
lit,
moon.
fam.
Hey, can you please shush while this is the climax?
Yeah, we can climax silently. Well, the luminescent blue glow of the moon through his window, leaving a cold lighting.
Hey, this is my story. Shush.
You don't want to mix it up for the climax?
No.
No.
Leaving a cold lighting. He stood up and slowly made his way towards the doorway, when suddenly the door, which was previously wide open, slammed in his face. He gasped. He gasped and fell back. He was out of breath when he hit the ground, and he began breathing heavily. His eyes.
Oh, I can make that sound. Let me just fall out of my chair.
His eyes wide open. He waited for a few seconds before getting back up on his feet. He reached out and grasped the cold door handle with his bandaged hand and creaked it open.
Cracked it open. Crapped it. He crapped it, guys. He crapped it.
He looked out into the dark hallway and tiptoed out of his room. The window at the end of the hallway lit up the darkness with blue moonlight as he padded his way down. He could hear footsteps rustling around him, and faint giggling led by the pitter-patter smell of small feet, which sounded like a child had run in front of him. Okay, Dylan, get out!
Why are you so angry?
I'm recording something.
I'm grabbing my phone.
Recording. We can cut this out.
Yeah, I'm cutting this part out.
Definitely. Okay, where are we?
Anyway, after the cut,
Yeah.
the hallway was longer than he had remembered. It seemed endless, like the ride home from the hospital. He heard the door creak in front of him. "Mom?" he called out in his shaky voice. Suddenly, a door slammed behind him as he jumped and turned around. Behind him, he heard a long, eerie groan from behind him. That
Sound like Chica.
That sounded to Krog right in his ear. He turned around as fast as he could and was suddenly face to face with none other than his dead sister. Her eyes were clouded white, her skin pale, and the right side of her jaw only dangling on by tissue and muscle.
That's
Glass
nasty.
protruding from her forehead and
Headshot.
black blood leaking down her face.
What is this, Silas Jack?
Her blonde hair pulled up back in a ponytail as it always was. Wearing her gray t-shirt and athlete shorts, which were dirty and spotted with blood. Her legs were bent in ways they shouldn't be.
She's a goat.
She stood emitting a long croaking noise, only an inch away from Toby's face. Toby yelled out and fell back. Ah! He started to crawl backwards away from her, not able to break eye contact.
Breathe eye contact.
He held with her, blank, dead eyes. He dragged himself backwards until he backed up into something. He stopped for a second. Everything was dead silent except for his heavy breathing and crying. He slowly looked up and met at the blank face of a tall figure that stood over him. Behind the tall, dark mess were rows of children, looking from range.
I told you, he's doing some weird ass shit.
3 to 10 years. Their eyes completely black and dark black blood leaked from their eye sockets.
Again, is this Silas Jack or something?
He screamed and stood up as fast as he could, only to be tripped by dark black tendrils that wrapped around his ankle.
Okay, now this is a hentai.
There's probably something like that. He fell straight on his
Oh,
stomach
God.
and got the wind knocked out of his chest. He tried to scream out, but he couldn't make a sound. He wheezed out before it all went black. Toby woke up with a start. He screamed out and sat up as fast as he could, completely short of breath.
Hold on. What do you think that scream would sound like?
He wheezed out and held his chest with his bandaged hands. It was just a dream.
Just a dream.
A dream. He laid back down on his bed and rolled over on his side. It felt like a giant weight had been lifted off his chest as he took in deep breaths. He stood up and padded over to his window. He saw nothing. Nothing was out there. No ghosts, no figures, nothing. He heard the rustling and coughing of his father out the door. His door was closed. He walked over and opened it, looking out into the hallway once again. He padded down the hallway and into the kitchen where he found his dad standing and having smoke in their living room. Toby waited for a second and watched him from around the corner before a burning feeling started deep in his chest. Deep,
Love.
boiling anger
That
took
too.
over him. He heard the angry little imaginary
this one.
voices in his head. Do it. Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
Do it.
They chanted. He turned away and held his arms. He felt like he actually had control over himself, unlike he did the past few weeks since he got home from the hospital. He actually had complete thoughts for just moments before they were clouded by the chanting of the little voices in his head. Kill him.
Kill him.
He wasn't there.
He wasn't there.
He
He
wasn't
wasn't
there.
there.
Kill him.
Kill him. Kill him. Hey, it's multiple voices. We have
Yeah.
to do it at the same time.
They continued on. Toby trembled. No, he wasn't going to do it. What was it? What, was he going crazy? No, he won't kill anyone. He can't. He hated his father, but he had no way he was going to kill him. That was it. The last thought he had before he fell into an idle state once again. His influence of the voices in his head was too much. He began to silently walk up behind his father. He reached over the counter and to the knife holder in the kitchen, pulled out the largest knife that had been resting in the case.
By the way, that he didn't mess up. It literally says, and pulled out the largest knife.
Yeah. He felt a sensation over his chest. He let out a snicker. He began laughing so hard he had to gasp for breath. His father turned around abruptly before he felt a brute ooze forth or shove him to the floor. He grunted as the hair was knocked out of him.
What? Wait, the hair?
He looked up at the boy who stood over him, grasping the kitchen knife in his hand.
Toby, what are you doing?
He went in to sit up and put
arms out in front of him.
arms out in front of him in self-defense. Before he knew it, Toby was on top of him. He went to grab at his neck, but his father reached out and blocked his hands by grabbing onto this wrist.
Stop! Get off of me, you little fucker!
He yelled with his other hand. He threw off-center punch towards Toby's shoulder, but he didn't stop. The
This
look
could have
in
been
Toby,
a bit more grammar.
yeah,
Better.
the look in Toby's eyes was not sane. It looked as if a demon had taken control over him. He yelled back and went to stab the knife into his father's chest, but he blocked him and grabbed onto his wrist once again. He went to shove him back, but Toby kicked out his feet in front of him and landed a hard blow straight into his face. His father
Pow, right in the kisser.
His father recoiled and pulled his arms against the cuff. Pulled his arms away to cuff his face, but Toby got back up and drove the knife straight into his shoulder. His father let out a loud cry and went to pull the knife out, but before he did, Toby threw his fist straight into his face. He began to pound his fists into his head, laughing and wheezing. He cracked his neck and grabbed the knife and ripped it out of his shoulder. He drove it deep into his dad's chest and repeatedly stabbed into the torso. Blood spilling out and getting splattered everywhere. He didn't stop until his father's body went still. He threw the knife over to the side and leaned over his body, coughing and panting. He stared at his smashed-in face and sat there twitching, till a loud scream broke the silence. He looked over to see his mother standing a few feet away, covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "Toby," she screamed. "Why did you do that?" She cried. "Why?" She screamed. Toby stood up and began to back away from his father's bloody corpse. He began to
Just eat the knife back into his body.
back out the kitchen. He looked down at the blood-soaked bandages on his hands and looked up at his mother one last time before he turned and ran out the house. He ran into the garage and slammed his hand against the control panel on the wall to push the button to open the garage door. Before he ran out, his father's 2 hatchets had been hanging on the tool rack above the table, full of jars, filled to the brim with old rusted nails and screws. One hatchet was new. It had a bright orange handle and a shiny blade. The other was old, with a wooden handle and an old dull blade. He grabbed both and looked down at the table, and his eyes met a box of matches, and under the table was a red gasoline tank.
Ooh.
He held both of the hatchets in one hand and grabbed the matches and gasoline before running out of the house. Of the garage. Down the driveway and up the street. As he approached the street light that he could see out of his own bedroom window, he heard police sirens in the distance. He turned around. Toby stood for a second. He turned around and red and blue flashing lights came rushing down the street. Toby stood for a second before he pulled open the cap on the gasoline tank and ran down the street, spilling gasoline all over the street. After a minute, he turned to run into the trees. He poured the last bit of gasoline out before he reached into his pocket and pulled out a match. He struck it against the box and immediately dropped it. In an instant, flames burst out around him. The fire caught onto the trees and bushes around him, and before he knew it, he was surrounded by fire. The silhouettes of police cars were visible through the flames as he backed away into the forest around him. He looked around, but his vision was blurred. His heart was pounding, and he closed his eyes for a moment. That was it. This was the end. Toby felt a hand on his shoulder. He opened his eyes and looked over to see a large white hand with long, bony fingers.
I told you, bony fingers!
And that rested on his shoulder. He followed the arm that was attached to the hand up to a towering dark figure. It appeared to be wearing a dark black suit, and its face was completely blank. It towered over Toby's small frame, and it looked down on him. Tendrils reached out from its back. Before Toby knew it, his vision blurred and he was surrounded by the sound of ringing in his ears. Everything went blank. That was it. That was the end. That was how Toby Rogers died. A few weeks later, Connie sat in her sister's kitchen. Her sister Lori sat next to her drinking a cup of coffee. About 3 weeks ago, Connie lost her husband and her son. And a few weeks before, she lost her daughter to a car crash. Since then, she moved in with her sister. The police were keeping her busy. They had just finished cleaning up the case, and the story had been released 2 weeks ago. And the focus of the world seemed to have shifted to completely new stories. Lori switched on the TV to a news broadcast. On the TV, the news reporter began introducing
I'll
the
do this
headline.
one. We have breaking news. Last night, there has been a reported murder of 4 individuals. There are no suspects yet, but the victims were a group of middle school kids who had been out in the woods late last night. The kids had been bludgeoned and stabbed to death. The investigators had discovered a weapon at the crime scene, which appears to be an old, dull, bladed hatchet, as you can see here.
The picture changed to show snapshots of the weapon exactly as it was left on the crime scene.
Investigators have pulled the name of a possible suspect, Toby Rogers, a 17-year-old boy who, a few weeks ago, had stabbed his father to death and tried to cover up his escape by setting a fire in the streets in the forest area around the neighborhood. Although they had believed the young boy had died in the fire, investors suspect that Rogers may still be alive due to the fact that his body was never found.
That was my favorite creepypasta. What are we now? 44 minutes? Wow, this is long.
Yeah. Almost 45.
Also, since since SoundCloud ran out of space, like we had a certain number of minutes. This is exceeding the minutes, so what I'm planning on doing is starting a Dark Manor YouTube channel to post.
We could also put this on Spotify.
Yeah, to post the Dark Manor podcast on YouTube, plus the podcast on YouTube. Plus, we have we can put in gaming videos of horror series or of horror videos. So that works well. So what was your review of it?
Well,
We all know my thoughts. Let's hear about yours.
I definitely think when it comes to the creepypastas themselves, this is one of the few actually original ones. No, I was bullied, so I'm gonna kill people. This was more like Slenderman had someone in mind, and he picked Toby, and then we basically just got to see everything that happened after that. In the beginning, with his sister, that was kind of like how it helped weaken his mind, letting the Slenderman get inside, making him become the proxy.
Actually, with a little bit
It's a better backstory than most I've seen of any creepypasta.
yeah.
Hell, most of them aren't even backstories. The only backstories would be Jeff the Killer, Ticci, Toby, a couple others.
Actually, this this makes me believe that Tiki Toby Tiki Toby was actually influenced by the operator instead of Slenderman.
What do you mean?
Let's start it out of the way. I'm mostly just doing parallels between how Alex acted versus how Toby acted. Like,
if you don't know who Alex is, we're talking about Alex Creeley from the web series Marble Hornets.
So, let's take a look at how he tried to flee or hide his tracks. Burning. What did Alex try to do during Marble Hornets?
Burn things. The tapes. And sorry for the spoilers, but Tim's house.
It came out like a long time ago, so...
Some people still haven't seen it, and you know that.
You guys should, though.
10 years of Marble Hornets, but still no one has seen it that much.
Then there's the fight between Toby and his dad seemed a lot like Entry 86.
Well,
in my opinion, at least.
I would say more like I think it was definitely one of the ones where Jay was looking at the files he stole from Alex, but what he did between the random guy that tried to help him in the tunnel. I think it was more like that, if anything.
Yeah, the only thing that really debunks this is the fact that the operator doesn't have tentacles.
Yeah. And the Marble Hornets guys have said that Marble Hornets takes place in its own universe, and the operator doesn't use proxies. He might control people, but that's only not really control, but he likes
that's not like permanent.
He like
temporary.
No, he like tempts people into doing it. Like, he makes them think they have to do this.
That's kind of what happened with Toby.
Yeah, but the Slenderman, he like literally controls his people.
We don't really know what happened between those like 3 weeks of him like killing his father and then killing 4 kids. Like, what did he do at that time? Was he just as like lost in the woods somewhere until either Slenderman or the operator? This is a weird conversation to have.
Yeah. The thing I want to know, if he left one of his hatchets at the crime scene, how did he get it back? How did he get another hatchet? Did he take it?
What?
Or... No, okay, so everyone depicts Toby with 2 hatchets. In the story, it says he takes 2 hatchets. The new shiny one and the old dull one.
Come on.
But if he left the old dull one at the crime scene, how did he get a new hatchet?
I mean, those are just fan art. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, I guess
the fan
not.
art doesn't matter. Anyway, a final verdict from 0 to 10. How would you rate it?
I give it an 8, 8.5.
I give it a 9.
Of course you do.
So anyway, this was all for the Dark Manor podcast.
Yep.
If you liked,
We went on for about 50 minutes.
yeah,
We almost got to the 1 hour mark for once.
yeah,
Unlike the last one.
yeah,
We got like halfway through and then we were finished already.
yeah. So please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel since this is uploaded on the YouTube channel instead of
Yep.
SoundCloud. I'll be uploading
Also go to Spotify to look forward to.
if we can find out if we learn how to.
We will
get
be
out
putting
on,
it up on Spotify.
How do we put it on Spotify?
We have fucking Google. We can figure it out with that.
Okay, we'll try to put it on Spotify. I'll make an update video on the Dark Manor YouTube channel. I'll be posting an update on SoundCloud saying where to find the YouTube channel. Anyway,
We'll also put it on a couple other places.
yeah. Anyway, that was the Dark Manor podcast. I'm Hayden,
I'm Haxon.
and sweet dreams.